Spurs 3, Burnley 0. The Thomas Frank era in the Premier League is up and running, and we're going to break the game down from a tactical perspective and talk about exactly what we learned. If you are new to the channel, please make sure to subscribe. I'd massively appreciate it. I'm on the road to 15,000 subscribers on YouTube, so I'd massively appreciate it if you guys get involved. We're going to talk about the setup, how Spurs managed to break Burnley down, the individual quality of Richarlison, Mohammed Kudus in this game, Lucas Bergvall, Pape Matar. There were so many standout performances, and obviously we got a glimpse of what these kind of games are going to look like a little bit under Thomas Frank. But one big bit of news that we have to speak about before we get into the game is Eberechi Eze looks like he's on his way to Tottenham. And there were moments in that first half where it really felt like we needed a player. Well, we know we need a player like that, right? Because we are crying out for this number 10, James Maddison's injury. But it made it so obvious as to why we're targeting the players that we're targeting. Not just Eze, because Eze feels like a tap-in, really, to go and get that deal done, to add that little bit of spark and creativity, which I think was missing in the final third, in that first half, even after the first goal, but also players like Savinho. I think there was a lot of clues today as to why we want to make these specific signings. I'm going to talk about that, but really decent performance from Spurs today. You can't ask for much more than that, really, in your first home Premier League game. As manager, 3-0, 3 points, clean sheet, move on to the next game, which is Man City, which is going to be an entirely different test. And I think from what we saw against PSG, we can go into that game with a little bit of confidence. But what do we learn from today? Now, this is obviously how Spurs set up. Vicario in goal, Polo, Romero, Van der Ven and Spence. I think we all thought that was going to be the back line. The midfield was where it got very interesting. And also, guys, I appreciate you once again sticking with me using the tactics board here rather than our usual setup, which I can confirm is returning from tomorrow because I'm getting my laptop back tomorrow. So once again, thanks for sticking with me. But there are going to be screenshots and analysis in this video and stuff as well, so stick around, obviously. Gray, Bergvall and Sarr in midfield. Bergvall was kind of playing as the more advanced midfielder, although it felt more like a 4-3-3 than a 4-2-3-1, what we have been used to seeing. Kudus on the right, Richarlison up front, and Johnson on the left. Now, I was a bit of an advocate in the lead up to the game about potentially playing almost a 4-4-2 with Solanke playing off Richarlison to kind of give us that little bit of, to have someone to drop in the middle and kind of create in those central areas. Solanke's link-up play is very, very good. And I thought that could be a benefit of us to us, especially as well with Burnley wanting to maybe sit in a little bit deeper. And they obviously were kind of compact in the shape that I predicted they'd set up in with the right winger, Son, I think it was, tucking in as a right wing back with Walker kind of shuffling off across into a back three. So again, they want to be compact, four across the middle, and then the Lyle Foster up front as the kind of outlet. I don't think Burnley were like as disgusting low block as we thought they were going to be, but obviously Spurs get the early goal, which forces them to come out a little bit more. And even then, Spurs did have a little bit of difficulty breaking them down. There was a little bit of Mohammed Kudus aside, there wasn't really that spark in the final third to go and kill the game off, and we got a little bit sloppy. I thought Romero, particularly on the ball, trying to, in this kind of lineup with Gray, Bergvall and Sarr in that midfield, right, there's not necessarily that natural passer, right? Sarr, Bergvall, great energy, ball carrying ability, able to produce moments of quality in the final third, but they're not necessarily passers to try and get you out of these kind of situations, to break a team down, to pick the lock, those kind of playmakers that you're looking for. Romero, I almost think, got a little bit frustrated without that kind of Maddison profile in there, or an Eze sort of profile that is able to receive the ball in the half turn and make it stick and then make something happen. He was punching these balls through the lines quite a lot, Romero, but often like overhit or underhit, just a little bit sloppy, and that led to a few turnovers that Burnley had a few opportunities from. But there were some moments of quality in that first half. Bergvall, that first touch in the first minute inside the penalty area to get shot off. We started the game really well with really good intensity, I thought, from that aspect. And then within 10 minutes, we're 1-0 up. Mohammed Kudus gets the ball on the right-hand side. It's an excellent swinging cross into the box. And Richarlison, just a clever bit of movement to peel off the centre-halves. And it's a great first-time finish. Kudus receives the ball kind of back to goal, which is what I think he did which I think is what he did so well today, as he has done in recent games, especially the PSG game where he was kind of playing in more of a front two. Receives the ball back to goal. Burnley defender gets tight to him. He's able to get around him. And then he knows that Richarlison's going to be in around there. He puts the cross into a good area off his weak foot, just as he did for the second goal as well. Richarlison peels back. It's a wonderful finish. I feel like because of the bicycle kick that he scored for the second goal, that finish isn't going to get the appreciation that the first one should actually, it should deserve, really. But it was brilliant. But then Spurs did struggle after that. We did struggle. I think one reason as to why, and I don't want to I don't want to kind of criticise Brendan Johnson too much, because obviously the third goal is excellent. I want to come on and talk about that, and that's exactly how he can be useful in this team. So if we kind of recreate this type of situation, right, where Spurs still 1-0 up in this game, Burnley still trying to be a little bit more compact, trying to not to open the game up too much to the point where they feel like they can't get back in it, because they did have chances to get back in it. Obviously, they're still compact in their shape, and I feel like in games like this, where you've got Spence on the left-hand side as a left-back and Johnson out on the wing, where you haven't got Destiny Udogie, who is a much more suited partner, I think, if you're going to play Johnson on the left in games like this, because Johnson can go, Udogie can go on the outside. It allows Johnson to kind of make more out to in runs, operate in more central spaces. I also just don't think Johnson on the left in these kind of games against lower blocks naturally suit him anyway, because he hasn't really... That's not his game. He's not a winger that's going to take on the man all the time and consistently work them over. That's why I wanted Wilson Odobert to start. And I do think Odobert, because he's comfortable receiving off the touchline and coming inside and crossing. Although we did see that from Johnson a little bit more in the second half when the game opened up. It's just not the optimal kind of pairing that you want, I think, down that left-hand side in games like this, because there'll be so many times where Spence would pick the ball up deep and carry the ball forward. And as he wants to come inside, Johnson kind of wants to operate in these kind of areas as well. And it almost feels like they're kind of blocking each other a little bit, even when there is more space and Burnley aren't as compact as they were in that situation. It just wasn't really working. But then second half kind of comes around. Like I said, in the first half as well, like Spurs, I just think naturally lacking that playmaker, that kind of passer, really. But it was a decent performance. Burnley had a couple of little moments. But then second half, Spurs, I think, were better from the outset. Burnley had a couple of little moments here and there. Jadon Anthony had a moment in and around the box, but then straight away Spurs with a real moment of quality. Mohammed Kudus, like again, Richarlison is going to get the plaudits for the finish, but that check back from Kudus is what he does so well, because he wants to play the game at his kind of pace. He does it so often, right, where he receives the ball back to goal and he'll lure you in, and then he's got that burst to just get away. His change of direction because of his low centre of gravity is so good. And his burst of acceleration, and you saw it for that second goal. Stands up his fullback, that defender on that left-hand side, slow, and then chop, and he's away. And because he's so two-footed in those kind of situations, obviously he wants to naturally, when he's playing on the right, he wants to come inside and shoot on his left foot and all those kind of things. But his finishing and his crossing ability off his right foot is what's going to make him such a useful forward in this system, because he can kind of finish off any sort of angle because of his two-footedness. He can cross off any sort of angle. Like you usually typically want to see him kind of, if you imagine this is Kudus here, right, and you've got Porro here as the right back and the right winger, right, in these kind of situations, Kudus does want to kind of swap and come inside here, right, and cross from this half space into the penalty area, those little clip sort of balls. But also, if we put him in more wider situations where he can go 1v1 at the fullback, right, and you've got Richarlison kind of making the run to the back post here in a bit of space, Kudus will stand up his man 1v1. You think that he wants to come inside here, but the chop and he's bang and he's away. And then it's a brilliant cross on his right foot. And the finish from Richarlison, I mean, there's not too much you can pick the bones out of with that, other than just to say it was an unbelievable finish. Unbelievable finish. There was a moment when I was at the game earlier where a cross came in off that right-hand side and Richarlison kind of was peeling off to the back post. And I said to my old man that I go with, and I was like, bicycle kick. I kind of thought that he was going to do it, weirdly. And in the second half he does, and he just connects, and it's an unbelievable goal. And then the game's just completely broken open for Spurs. And that is where Johnson then comes into it. The third goal, again, if you're talking about Richarlison, is excellent hold-up play. Excellent hold-up play. Sometimes Richarlison hold-up play can be a bit bitty, a bit scrappy, but even if it is, right, and it isn't in this example, as you'll see here, ball goes into Richarlison, and I think this is a goal that we're going to see from Tottenham quite a lot with the profiles that we've got in the squad, because you've got a player in Brendan Johnson that wants to make those runs into the space behind, those out-to-in runs off the left-hand side, which I think is actually where we could see him being deployed a little bit more off the bench. Those kind of out-to-in runs into the space, as we saw with Heung-min Son, as well with the striker dropping a little bit deeper and Harry Kane and Johnson making the run, or Son making the runs in beyond him. I think we're going to see that from Johnson on the left, particularly as well. But I think it's a goal we're going to see a lot from Spurs, because you see Romero, I think it's such a good way to... Again, Burnley were open by that point. Right? They were more open. They were 2-0 down. They wanted to chase the game. But when you have got Romero, who I moaned a little bit about in the first half in terms of his way of passing being a little bit sloppy, when you have got a player that is brave enough to constantly want to punch the balls through the lines like that, you're taking players out of the game if you get it spot on, and it means that you can break down a team a lot easier. That's why those line-breaking passes are so important. That was why it was so crucial that we hung on to Christian Romero. Richarlison, then makes it stick. It's excellent hold-up play. And then the little touch to take it away from the defender, and then Sarr burst in and said, I'm going to take over here. When you've got players like Sarr who hoover up the ground and eat up the ground, but eat up loose balls as well, whether that's like an opponent dispossessing the pass or whether it's a bit of hold-up play from the striker. I saw James Alcott talking about this when he was talking about Benjamin Sesko, actually, at Manchester United. One thing he complained about with Benjamin Sesko is actually his first touch quite a bit. But now at United, in the system that they're using him in, where he's got those two kind of 10s who are so alive to the situation in Mbumo and Cunha, who can just feed off those kind of scraps and make something out of it. I'm not saying Richarlison's first touch or hold-up play was bad in this example, but Richarlison wants to get away, and he could have easily taken that ball on himself. But Sarr spots what's happening next. He knows the space is there. Johnson is already making the run. Sarr gets in there, hoovers it up, and plays a lovely weighted pass through to Johnson. And he takes himself wider. He opens up the angle for him to then dink it across the goalkeeper on his right foot. I thought he'd kind of taken himself a little bit too wide at first, but it's such a clever finish. But it's all about Richarlison and Sarr and Romero as well, just punching that ball through, being brave enough to just open the game up. They're risky sometimes, those line-breaking passes, but if you're punchy with it, if you're direct with it, if you're aggressive with it like Romero, you're going to see much more of a benefit to it in kind of the long term. You're going to see it's going to work more times than it's not. And we did see him be sloppy playing out from the back at times in that first half, but there it just works so well. And when you get it right, it gets right, and that is just when you get it right, it just works perfectly. And I think again that's why it was so crucial to hold on to him, because I think it's just going to help us be able to break games open a lot more. And like I said, I think when you've got Eze and Savinho hopefully potentially to come into this squad, they're players who can produce real off-the-cuff moments of brilliance, like Kudus can as well, right, obviously. But when you're playing against a team that is sitting in a little bit deeper, who you're struggling to break down, at times like Spurs were today, there just wasn't that maverick kind of in the final third to make it happen. Bergvall, I was so impressed with his desire a lot of the time and his energy. And also, like, even if he's not necessarily the most creative player in that final third, in that kind of attacking zone, he still wants to receive the ball in those areas and he still wants to make something happen. And his head is just on a swivel. He wants to receive it at all kind of angles in all areas of the pitch. And I absolutely love that. But he's not necessarily got that. He's not got the explosive pace, obviously, of someone like a Savinho if he wants to get into those wide positions. But also with like an Eze, those twinkle toes, that deft sort of touch to just kill it and then make something happen. Bergvall isn't that sort of player, right? But Eze is. And when you've got a player like Eze receiving between the lines in the final third, like Bergvall was in that first half, but not being able to sort of... You're not playing necessarily to his biggest strengths, but you're playing needs must because of the injuries that we have got. If you add an Eze to that, naturally you're going to have more success against teams that are going to want to sit in, because you've got a magician in that final third that wants to be brave, take shots from outside the box, but find little combinations with the striker as well. Eze, I think what we'll see with him, with Richarlison and Solanke especially, to kind of open up games a little bit more, is that little bounce pass where, if we kind of see it here, right? Imagine this counter is Eze. You've got two centre-halves maybe at Richarlison's back, right? Eze picks up the ball. The defender comes onto him. He fires that little ball into Richarlison, then comes around here, receives it back, and then will get shot off. That little bounce pass, that little 1-2 with the striker that we saw so often with Matar, actually. But again, naturally, like I said, Spurs aren't going to struggle as much when you've got players like Eze and Savinho in the team. Savinho is a player that is naturally going to hold the width, can go inside and outside, will combine a lot better with a player like Jed Spence down that left-hand side if Spence is the first choice left-back, or if it is Destiny Udogie. He's so comfortable running in behind like Johnson does as well, but also his crossing ability, his willingness to go, his willingness and relentlessness to consistently take on his man over and over and over again. Like if you're in these kind of situations, right, against a compact defence, Savinho will just keep going at the fullback, out on the outside every single time. He's relentless with it, and that's how you kind of break these teams down, whereas Johnson isn't going to do that. But that's where Johnson comes into the game once you have broken that game open. And I do think if Spurs are able to harness the power of having those creators in the final third, those brilliant players like Eze, Kudus and Savinho that are able to produce off-the-cuff moments, then you're going to see players like Johnson, Tell thrive a lot more as squad players, because the game is broken open a little bit more and you're able to exploit that space in behind, especially then when you've got players like Sarr, etc., Bergvall, who are going to hoover up those second balls in midfield, hoover up behind the striker to then play those balls through the lines for the likes of Johnson to run onto. I just think it's going to be something that we see quite a lot once Spurs have broken the game open. Like with Romero, Aguero, who plays a big important part in this goal, because of his desire to, or his willingness to kind of slow the play down, put his foot on the ball, wait, entice the opposition on, that's how that punchy line-breaking pass becomes even more dangerous, because you've opened up the space by luring the press, and then you've got a striker that can make it stick. You've got midfielders like Bergvall and Sarr who are going to already be running onto that ball. You've already got Johnson making the run in behind. There is just so much, like, and Nathan Clark used this word when kind of describing this sort of move as well. There's so much momentum already in that move, with someone already hoovering up the second ball, and then someone like Johnson making the run in behind. So, like you said, you've got Savinho, Eze, players like that to break the game open, and once the game is broken open, there is going to be a lot of opportunities for Tell, who wants to run into the space as well, and Johnson to really kind of feast and still be impactful in this side. Yeah, really, really decent performance from Spurs today, I thought. Like I said, we know what we're missing, and we're trying to correct that, but there's also a hell of a lot to like already. Like, there's signings that are coming through are raising the floor and raising the ceiling massively. There's good competition for places. If Richarlison can stay fit, I think Richarlison and Solanke are going to push each other really, really nicely. And I'm looking forward to what we can see from this Spurs team this season. A really good start under Thomas Frank. Make sure you let me know your thoughts on the video. Let me know let me know who you thought was your man of the match in the comments as well. Thoughts on all the players. And like I said, the proper analysis videos with the tactics board on the screen, with the screenshots, everything is going to be back for next week. I'm getting my laptop back tomorrow. So once again, I appreciate your patience with all this. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to like it, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.